So welcome to Southern Ohio Museum and Cultural Center. So we are continuing our vessel discussion, but with a little added twist. This is Emily Uldrich, our museum educator, and we're going to talk about eggs today. We have this beautiful carved porcelain egg vessel by Jennifer McCurdy, and this is on loan from the Sherrie Gallerie, made on the potter's wheel. This starts its life as porcelain clay made on the potter's wheel. The shape is altered and then carved, and the artist really tries to push the limits, how much she can carve away and still have the piece stand through the firing of the clay. So earlier when we talked about vessels, we talked about vessels being something that's open, that contains space. And it is our experience with humans that we know that eggs are actually vessels. They hold something even though they don't have an opening. So at the Southern Ohio Museum and Cultural Center, we have this really fabulous collection of Clarence H Carter's eggs. So Emily and I are going to talk today about Clarence Carter's eggs, his philosophy of eggs, and how he thought of them as vessels as we tie them into the vessel exhibition. So Emily, talk to us about Clarence Carter's philosophy of eggs.
So Clarence Carter is best known for American scene painting or regionalism, and in the first part of his career, that's what he really concentrated on as part of the Cleveland School. And later in his career, Clarence H Carter started doing advertising for National City Bank, and that led him in a direction toward experimenting with his style. He started to use abstraction and geometry more in his work, but what's interesting when you hear Clarence H Carter talk about his work is that he hated abstraction in a pure form. So it wasn't abstraction that he's going for, it was more like an abstracted symbol. So it's the symbolism of the egg that really attracted him. And if you look back on his work, especially his early work, like the Pieta and the Lady of Shalott, and even Let Us Give Thanks, he's really attacking these archetypal themes where he's dealing with what it means to really be alive, and what is death, and what is that transition between those two worlds. And with the egg as his symbol, he's really able to explore that.
Right, because the egg is a symbol. We think of hope, we think of joy, we think of new life and new birth. And certainly at Easter time, we celebrate the egg as that symbol of new life and springtime and hope.
Yeah, the title of this one is Indecision. And you can see that he's put the egg into this architectural setting. And a lot of the things that he includes in these egg paintings are things like doorways and staircases. So in addition to the egg symbolizing that transition between whatever it is that comes before life and then whatever it is that is life, also that doorway is also symbolic of a transition from one space into another.
Right, so as we look at a lot of these paintings and prints of Clarence Carter's, we're going to see this passageway, this kind of coming in, going out, entry, and traveling. There's really a traveling concept in these. There's also, except in a couple, we really see the absence of human forms in a lot of these, which really struck me when I first started learning about Clarence Carter's eggs paintings.
And this was one of his earliest series that had to do with the eggs, was the mandala series. And in this series, you can see an overlap of the ovoid form and then also the circle form. And so for Clarence Carter, he said that the egg was symbolic of life and the circle is symbolic of the universe. And we know the mandala from Eastern art also as a symbol, a visual interpretation of the physical universe. And what's interesting is he always starts these with this little glowing light in the middle, the seed. And I think it's really interesting. It doesn't seem like there's that big of a connection between this and something like Let Us Give Thanks. But even in Let Us Give Thanks, there's something beyond them that brought them together at that table. So it wasn't them out of their own free will. So there's something else bigger than us, the universe, that's here, or God, or whatever you want to call it, that Clarence Carter is tapping into, that there's something beyond just ourselves in our human form.
Here we have this wonderful egg floating up out of this flower. And if really ever there is an Easter image, this is certainly one. the birth out of the springtime calla lily bloom.
One of my favorite prints, being a graduate of Shawnee State University, in the Vern Rife Center, they hung Clarence Carter's prints for a long time. And one of the ones that was up there was The Ninth Hour, which being there, I didn't really think much of it, but looking back on it after seeing the body of his work and learning more about Clarence Carter, there's a lot of hope in that painting. So it's the crucifixion, you've got the 3 crosses, and then there's 5 spears pointed up, one coming up at a diagonal. But that diagonal not only points at Christ's side, but it also points up to the solar eclipse at the top. But what's interesting about that solar eclipse is that the shadow couldn't cover the corona. There's hope there beyond it, and that hope is that potential of life which is contained in that vessel of the egg.
Right. It is clearly a vessel that contains so much in this form, and it's a form that we all know just as humans. It's sustenance, it's food, it's egg, it's reproduction, it's life itself.
But it's also kind of funny that looking back on these, so he started these in the early 60s, and if you look back on like what happened in the couple of decades after that, there's Mork Mindy, and like his vessel, his spaceship is literally an egg. But it's interesting. I wonder if they looked at Clarence Carter's work.
You wonder if he has. He influenced a lot of artists. He taught for many, many years. Why don't we come over and look at these two? And this is actually a gift from the Carter family. The grandson came through with his wife and gifted us some that were in the family lineage.
I hope you can pick up that texture of the scintilla paper.
Right.
But you don't always see those fiberglass fibers up close like on the real paper.
So Clarence Holbrook Carter actually formulated, he worked with a paper company and formulated a paper called scintilla paper. And it is paper pulp that's mixed with a matte fiberglass. And so he's starting not with a flat sheet of paper, but he's starting with this surface. And this one looks like it's more of a pastel with some collage elements in it. This face in here, which is a very Oz type image, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is very Oz-like. But we do believe that this is Clarence Carter imposing himself on that egg. So this is actually has a much more contemporary feel to it. And here we have this small egg, and you don't know if this is a reflection of this larger piece, but you get this relationship of this larger egg and this smaller egg, and this human eye that's collaged onto there. And there's actually a series of photographs that we have of Clarence Carter. Clarence's son was a photographer and took a series of photographs of Clarence Carter that he then cut and pasted and manipulated into different egg forms, so that the egg becomes part of his face and his face becomes part of the egg.
It's interesting to see the egg used as a reference for the human face. And there's even one of the mandala series which is titled Heads in Circles, which implies that he is thinking of the egg as a head.